Hello everyone, I hope you all are well. My name is Wasonga, and I have the pleasure and also the curse of talking to you in the afternoon. After you've had a very big lunch, some of you are sleepy. I think we've had a very in-depth panel discussion. So just try bear with me. One thing that I can state is my session is going to be very, very technical. No, I'm joking. It's going to be very agnostic, less technical. So just give me a few moments of your time. We're going to be talking about trends in cybersecurity. Now, how many of you know Morpheus? Okay, it's an old movie. Like the new Matrix wasn't good, but Morpheus comes from a movie known as The Matrix. Now, The Matrix, it's something. It's a movie that I really like. Nothing to do with cybersecurity. I mean, a few key things. But there's a there's a time in that movie where Morpheus talks to the main protagonist, which is Neo, and gives him an option of saying, the red or blue pill, you live and you learn. Similar towards that, if you look at organizations, there are those that actually know that they are under attack, and those that actually don't know that they're under attack. Now, drawing parallels towards the movie is, I think the red pill was saying, you take it and continue living with your life as is. The blue pill was for you to take it and then you would understand what the matrix actually is. Get to understand the system, get into the perils of what's actually going. And I'm taking those two parallels and likening it to the current situation that is the organization. Okay? So, let's get into the first slide. I'll do a brief introduction of myself. I spent a lot of time on the animation, so. All right, so it's always good to give, by the way, if anyone wants to link with me, these are my socials. So scan the LinkedIn, the GitHub, I'm on Twitter, and I'm also a big gamer. So if you have Xbox, feel free to reach out to me. We don't do PlayStation. Anyway. No, we don't do that one. Anyway, so it's good to just give you an origin story in terms of where I am, or how I actually got here. So I graduated in 2012. Happened to have the opportunity of doing my undergrad outside of Kenya. So when I came back, it was in a computer science, computer security degree, graduated with honors, came back, and naturally, I think it's a resounding thing. Hakuna kazi. Are we in agreement? No one is hiring. I think it's a different time now with all these multinationals. No one's hiring, etc. But during my time, I managed to, learn some programming, learn some key solutions. And basically, what I did in that year I came back was create an education software. If anyone can remember that time, Jubilee was saying they're going to give all the children laptops. So I created an education software for those laptops because there wasn't anything practical they could do without the laptops. So I created a software, peddled it to schools, Makini, Light Academy, Nairobi Primary, etc. And then in 2014, I had the opportunity of actually joining Microsoft as a college hire. Now, since then, until now, I've actually been with that organization, but I have traversed different roles. I was a developer in the developer organization. I went and sold software. I was a peddler of software, as Njoroge will tell you. We were also with him. I peddled software, and I was also in support and services. So just hearing how people say, a customer calling you, nyenyenye, kuna shida, I've gone through what's that as well. But now I have the opportunity of working in engineering, specifically with the cybersecurity engineering team. And what I do is I focus on IoT security, SIEM and SOAR, network security, and also threat intelligence. So it's a vast amount of scenarios in terms of what I do, but most importantly, it's to give you the visibility that there's a lot you can actually do in cybersecurity, right? It's not, scare pen testing, defensive, offensive, no. There's so much you can actually do, whether it's the network, endpoint, identity, IoT, etc. And that's what we're actually going to be talking about today. So, let's get into what's the actual thing, or what is cybersecurity. I came up with this brief overview to just give us a good overview of some of the buzzwords that come in cybersecurity. I'm sure if you look at the top right man in the middle, anyone who's been in Kenya for the last 2 months has been hearing man in the middle, man in the middle, man in the middle. But what essentially does this actually mean? It's very simple. It's the practice of defending computers, servers, devices, electronic systems and data from malicious attacks. But where does this actually come from? What's the origin story? Let's get into the first aspect. If you look at today's organizations, right? We live in what is known as an expanding digital estate. What do we mean by this? How we are collaborating as an organization is not, from a technology perspective, it's not a perimeter sort of motion, right? It's not our internal firewall, VPN, everything transacts individually. No, we have API allowing us to integrate with other organizations, with our customers, with our collaborators. Now with this, what happens is our attack surface is extensively increased because we are not only protecting our internal network, but also those collaborations, those integrations, all of that is essentially coming into play. Now with this expanding digital estate comes an inherent risks. If I looked at a study that was done in actually 2020, it showed that with this integration, and specifically in COVID times, right, like 2020, I remember it was a good time for tech because we sold a lot of software, right? Because companies found themselves in terms of they were told you can't physically work together, you have to embrace remote work. And with that, they found common challenges. So similar to how we were investing in productivity, collaboration, enhancing all those approaches, we had attackers also investing in that same approach because they knew organizations were not prepared for remote work, specifically from a security perspective. What did we see in that motion? We saw an increase in sophistication of threats. Threats that are enabling AI. We have the ransomwares, we have petias, all those nice words, right? All of that essentially came specifically in the COVID time. And these are some of the common challenges that we are currently experiencing at the moment, right now, and this is what is happening due to the expanding of the digital estate. One thing that I would like you to note is that same study said in 2021, as of last year, there'll be 3.5 million unfulfilled security jobs, just in America alone. What does this mean? What does this mean? There's opportunity, guys. So everything that you essentially do, you can actually take advantage because there's opportunity towards them. The attackers are not sleeping. The adversaries, the bad actors, they're not sleeping. And the potential for you to take this advantage to help solve this global pandemic that is cybersecurity issues and challenges is something you can take advantage of. Just another study before we actually get into the trends. I took this actually today morning from Forbes magazine article. Funny enough, I only think they usually do rich lists, do the top hip hop list. Really, I was very surprised to see they have also some technology articles as well. But what I wanted you to note is the fact that they were able to state that the cost of cybercrime by end of 2022 will actually be $8 trillion. Now, if you think about that, there are aims in terms of how do we need to prioritize this and focus on specific scenarios. Now, based off of this article, I was able to pick some common trends that I think we can actually double down a bit in. From my view, these are the 4 key things that I would like to talk about. Now, this doesn't mean these are the only current trends. I think we had a session from one of my colleagues, I don't know if she's here, Joylene, talking about securing DevSecOps. That's also a major, I would say an honorable mention in terms of how people are shifting left from a security perspective, being able to get into depths when the application is being developed, ensuring that it's actually protected before it goes into production. Those are one of the trends that we're actually seeing, and we're seeing more companies actually adopt that. But based on what I would like to talk about are these four. Internet of Things, the rise of ransomware, remote working, cybersecurity risks, and increasingly sophisticated attacks. Let's get into what's it. The animation was just for you guys. Great. So, when we talk about Internet of Things, how many of you guys use Internet of Things? Raise of hands. If you don't know what Internet of Things is. Okay. Internet of Things, essentially, as you mentioned there, it's looking at physical devices outside of the most common scenarios, right? Your computers, your phones, your servers, etc. We are looking at these sort of devices that are essentially able to connect with the internet, send data, and for you to traverse different functionalities as well. Personally, in my house, I have a lot of Alexas. I have a lot of lights that have actually been configured to allow me to enter the house and say, Alexa, switch on this light, etc. It's very nice, especially, when the ladies pass by and say, Alexa, switch on this. Like, it looks very nice, right? But there is an inherent sort of risk that actually comes with the Internet of Things. And what do I mean by this? IoT has been created specifically to enhance collaboration and productivity. Security comes last. It's not been in the forefront. Why? Because as companies, they are looking at how do we make more money. If it's a wearable, if it's a light switch, how can we sell it and push it across? They're not thinking what's the inherent attack that can actually come with somebody gaining access towards that IoT environment. Another thing that I'd like to talk about is also operational technology. Now, if you look at the graphic, there's an element where it says healthcare systems, smart homes, big data, smart grids, etc. The technology that runs your warehouse, your petrochemical facility, your medicine plant is what's known as operational technology. That technology that basically works with the sensors, the thermal temperature, etc., right? The conveyor belts, all of that, the actuators, it's known as operational technology. And that primarily was built to enhance one thing, safety and productivity. So two things, safety and productivity. That particular technology is very old, and security, for one, was never a key focus for them. Now, come 2021, adversaries are really taking advantage of the fact that security is not at the forefront of these technologies. And with this, I have an example. The following is known as the Triton attack. It actually happened in one of the petrochemical facilities in Middle East. I will not say the country, because you can easily find out about it, but you can always go and look at it. So this basically talks about an attack that happened to this chemical facility, and the aim was not to steal data or disrupt the data. The aim was to disrupt the safety protocols and actually cause what's known as an explosion. Let's get into the depth in terms of what actually happened. In this specific case, you have a simple environment that would be engaging in a petrochemical facility. Now, if you talk about operational technology in the warehousing, there's what's known as the Purdue model that essentially focuses on the different layers of the overall warehouse. Now, level 0 is where the actual things that actually move, right? Your sensors, your actuators, your conveyor belts, etc. Level 1 are where your programmable logical controls essentially happen. Things that actually tell the physical things to move, right? On level 2 is where the management layer of the Purdue model comes into play. Here you have your engineering workstations, you have your HMIs, etc. Now, if you move over towards this side, is where I think everyone here is familiar with, right? DMZ and corporate network. You have your workstations. But this was the current scenario in that petrochemical facility. What actually happened? If we look at it, the first thing that happened with this attack is people were able to steal credentials in the corporate environment, right? Then through that, they were able to deploy PC malware in towards the level 2 layer. And what essentially happened is they deployed reconnaissance tools, just understanding what's actually happening in this OT environment. Do they have programmable logical controls? Do they have remote terminal units, etc.? And with that, they were able to install what's known as a remote access toolkit with an aim of accessing the safety programmable logical control. And their aim was very simple. Disable the safety PLC to cause an explosion. Now, this organization managed to gain access when they did this. But think about this. It's not just about losing data. It's safety. Let's say USIU was in a sort of a smart building sort of situation, right? And we find somebody gaining access has locked off the doors, then puts the AC on like a very high sort of temperature. You can imagine with all of us in here, what can actually happen towards that. So that's the inherent risk that we're actually seeing from an IoT security perspective. Let's go on towards the next aspect, which is ransomware. And I think everyone is familiar with ransomware. If you don't know ransomware, you really need to know about this. This is a 20-year-old technology. It's been here for years, and it's the most simplest, but the most inherent sort of cybersecurity threat and trend that we are seeing across the board. A couple of things that you can actually see is some elements of data. I'm not actually going to go through it fully, but you can see the cost of what ransomware is causing towards normal institutions is quite a lot. Well, it's 20 billion in just the last year in terms of impact towards data. But what I would like you to note for the fact is, as much as, you know, if those are not aware of what ransomware is it's a simple, it's a simple attack where people basically deploy a software onto your environment, it encrypts your data, and they essentially ask for a ransom for you to get it back. But based on what we have seen from studies, even if you pay, which 90% of the times is in Bitcoin, you never get the data back. So these are just bad people that are essentially coming up with ways in terms of how they can actually gain access towards your data. And these are some of the scenarios that we're actually seeing across. A common example of ransomware is as follows. This was very prevalent during COVID times when everyone was running for vaccines. You know, having a vaccine, you had to have a hookup, right? Like, niko na kuja hapa, niko na vaccine hapo, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But what happened as well was people were receiving emails saying, if you want to get access towards a vaccine, you know, fill this form, etc. Adversaries and bad actors took advantage towards that. As soon as people clicked the link, boom, data was encrypted and you were asked to pay a couple of Bitcoin, which was very expensive then. And if you have some Bitcoin now, pole, but that time it was a bit expensive. But so you can actually see the inherent risk. If you look at it from a pattern perspective, it's three key things around ransomware: entering the environment, traversing and spreading, and executing objectives. Simple things. Through client attacks, phishing, stealing credentials, they're able to gain access towards different users, and specifically towards targeted organizations, right? You can have access towards your machine. You go home, you go to funny websites to watch free movies. Through that, people are able to gain access towards your credentials, and then they move what's known as lateral movement to move towards the organization to gain access towards your critical solutions, right? So you can find even like let's say, like I know at Microsoft, the Askari down there who lets people in has a laptop, but he's still connected towards our network, right? He can go home, watch funny videos on funny sites, and that can be a potential entrant to actually impacting our overall system from a solution such as ransomware. And this is essentially what we actually see coming. As I mentioned, they enter the environment, then there's a whole portion of credential theft and malware installation. it's constant, and the aspect is just to go towards the organization moving up from a lateral perspective, gaining access towards specific people, and from an objective perspective, it's very simple. Exfiltration, steal your data, encrypt your data, and extortion. So this is something that we're seeing from a trend perspective. I won't go too much deep in terms of some of the use cases that we see. These are a lot of common use cases that we're actually seeing. WannaCry, I actually knew a couple of organizations, governmental, that were actually impacted by WannaCry in 2017. I remember working very late at night trying to recover data. Petya, it's a recurring one that we currently see. Ryuk and Samsung. You can go read more about this and get in depth towards that as well. In terms of the last two trends, the first one that we have is the remote working cybersecurity risk. Now, I'll just talk very simply in terms of what we see. As I mentioned, during COVID times, they weren't ready. What we saw is people literally just go telling people, go download Zoom, download Teams, get access, let's work, let's move across the board. Half the time, people were connecting from unsecure Wi-Fi networks, either at home, either at Java, either at a cat cafe, your neighbor's Wi-Fi, and that was a potential risk towards organizations. And potentially what we saw is people were able to access sensitive data through unsafe Wi-Fi networks. We talked about the scenario of the askari going home, gaining access towards funny websites, and then connecting towards the local network, and through that leveraging that as a path to actual impact, and then clicking on suspicious links as well. Specifically around COVID times, that was a common scenario we saw as well. Last but not least, in terms of the cybersecurity threats that we actually see is increasingly sophisticated attacks. Now, I like to use movies to basically express what I'm trying to talk about, right? So anyone here watched Avengers? Age of Ultron? Who remembers the storyline? It wasn't a good movie anyway. So Age of Ultron, what happened is the main actor again, Tony Stark, created basically a defense sort of system that was helping them control and manage themselves against threats. But what happened is they empowered that system that it was able to learn so much more and start to draw parallels in terms of what was right and what was wrong. And based on the fact that it was leveraging artificial intelligence, it consistently learned and basically improved its overall defense capabilities, that it was actually able to defeat the Avengers, at least in the first few times. This is something that we're actually seeing today. We have adversaries and bad actors actually investing in artificial intelligence and machine learning as ways to attack organizations. They do it with seasons, as we saw in COVID-19. These are literally billion-dollar enterprises that are coming up with ways in terms of how they can actually impact different organizations. And we have Emotet, which is a good example. And this was basically a malware that was targeted towards financial institutions, and it had the ability to change the nature of its attacks, right? So if you think anyone that does defensive security here, it's about understanding patterns, right? Once you understand that pattern, you know how to block it, you stop it, right? Now, any common security attack would more or less be stopped. But since due to the fact that Emotet was leveraging machine learning, it would understand different pathways of how it could gain access towards different people within the organization once it was actually stopped. And this is the inherent risk which we find ourselves from a security perspective. Now, in terms of how do we respond towards these emerging cybersecurity threats, I'll mention 4 key things. The first one is around zero trust capabilities. Anyone had that buzzword, zero trust? I think this is what's happening right now. You know, with IT, we move with buzzwords, right? Zero trust, transformation, digitization, man in the middle. Anyway, but when you think about zero trust, it focuses on three key things, right? Verify explicitly, applying least privilege access, and always assuming breach. Essentially, we have an understanding that any device, any person, within or without our network, we assume that they are under attack. That's essentially what we need to adopt. And this is getting into depths in terms of how do we manage our identity management, user behavioral analytics, determining the different threats in terms of threat intelligence. Understanding that and putting blocks across all those areas is what's essentially required. On top of that, we would want customers and even normal people to basically use automation to combat these increasingly sophisticated threats. Now, I don't know if you would have seen in my third slide where I talked about the operational challenges, security operational challenges. One of the most common challenges is, and I see we have a lot of SOC analysts or people who have gone through SOC analysis in this specific place, is you always get an alert, but half the time you're only investigating about 2, 3, 5 high severity alerts, right? It gets very tedious to be able to respond towards all these alerts, right? So basically enabling and leveraging automation to be able to respond to some of these alerts is actually key. Another thing is embedding security capabilities to address the overgrowing regulatory scrutiny and resource gaps. Here, I'd like you to think Age of Ultron, and it's also leveraging machine learning technology to be able to respond to some of these threats. At Microsoft, I like telling my customers every time we talk to them that we have this thing called fusion technology. So fusion technology is essentially how do we combine multi-level, low-level alerts to give you a high fidelity alert for you to actually investigate and go in depth. And how it works is we're able to look at an overall attack and basically identify that this is a multi-stage attack happening from different areas and focusing on one specific motion in terms of what needs to be attacked. But the fusion technology allows you to give you visibility across that environment and elucidate that high severity incident to get more visibility in terms of how you need to respond towards it. Last but not least, building over the horizon defense capabilities. Organizations need to invest. Security is key. We've seen $8 trillion, it's very expensive. We need to find ways in terms of how we are scaling up not only our people, but other ways of our technology to allow us to respond to some of these threats as well. Now, last but not least, I think I am 2 minutes. I would like to show you a video that's also sort of an inspiration of my cybersecurity passion. It's known as the Defenders. Anyone has heard or seen about this? No? Oh, I see there's one person there. So just to set the stage, the Defenders is essentially a video that talks about the next world war. The next world war won't be, no single shot will be the next world war. The next world war would be somebody gaining access towards KPLC and our energy and smart grid and switching it off. That's the impact of cybersecurity from a trends perspective. It's 2 minutes, I'd like to play, and I should be concluding around that. Just give me a second. I hope you can hear.
Once you had really 5 countries that could pull off
directly to the mic, but in case you can't hear about it, it's called The Defenders official movie trailer. You can gain access towards it, but at least for those that are near, they can hear more about it.
Cyber attack.
Can you hear anything?
Destruction. But in that group, no one really had the motivation or incentive. And then suddenly, you had this other group of actors.
The next war will be fought without a single bullet being fired. The next war will start with country A shutting down the power-greedy country B.
A lot of the countries that are having more global interests now than they ever did before are seeing it as the economical way to kind of frog the snap. Sony was an oh shit moment.
I received a call at 4 o'clock in the morning basically saying, we've got a threat.
The truth is, the world's more complex and the bad actors are getting even worse.
There is nothing that is 100% fail-safe. If you can build it, it can be hacked, period.
I think it's going to take this event, the three-letter agency people, and all this cyber 9/11 before things change.
The potential for damage is pretty spectacular, actually. We haven't even scratched the surface.
The most underappreciated people, I think, are the chief information security officers at organizations that are targeted hundreds of times a week.
I don't think that security is something that you can learn from a book.
This is really to apply a different mindset, a creative mindset in order to solve problems.
So it's persistence and curiosity and ingenuity.
It's not just about configuring the next router or the next firewall. The defenders, their mind is not just going on one thing, another one thing, another one thing. It's actually their mind is like...
To be a hacker, you have to be right one time. To be a defender, you have to be 100% accurate 100% of the time, or you've lost.
Movie is quite interesting. Feel free to, gain access, hopefully through through official sites and be able to watch the movie. It's quite amazing, especially if you have any passion in cybersecurity. Thank you.